As part of my ordination process, I took a training course in being a hospital chaplain. And one day during my rounds at the hospital, I encountered a woman whose story took my breath away. She'd been babysitting her young grandkids one day, doing errands with them, when she pulled into her driveway off of the busy road that her house was on. Somehow, in the chaos of opening doors and hoisting grocery bags, the woman didn't notice her toddler grandson get out of the car and wander out onto the road until it was too late. Now, the woman was a devout Christian, and she decided that the boy's accidental death was the work of God. God was punishing her. Why? Because she had loved this little boy too much. She had put her love for her grandchildren ahead of her love for God, she said, and God killed one of them to send her a message. God brought that car around that bend at the exact second that her grandson stepped into the road, because God manipulates the world in just this way and always for a reason. That's what the woman in her anguish believed. And incredibly enough, to hear her tell it, her pastor supported this view of how it worked, this tragedy. Well, it was hard to know where to begin with that. I felt like I was gazing over the rim of an experience to understand, nor the authority to evaluate. Who was I, who had never suffered a major death in my life at that point, to try to tell this woman anything? But I also felt in the deepest core of my heart that the terrible intersection of that boy's life and that car's trajectory was not the work of God, as if God were some kind of puppeteer, pushing us around according to some moral scorecard. This is a belief I'll stake my faith on. Accidents are accidents. Random, chaotic, amoral events. God does not cast them on us in order to send some kind of message or achieve some kind of justice. As Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, God makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. And yet at the same time, there's another truth which our reading from Acts pays witness to. Here, as in many places in the Bible, the hand of God does seem to lead and guide and act concretely in the world. Saul, the Pharisee, the persecutor of the church, Saul, who aided and abetted the stoning of the first Christian martyr, Stephen, and who imprisons Christians whenever he finds them, is on yet another search and destroy mission to Damascus when God strikes him blind in Jesus' name. Then God leads a reluctant disciple, Ananias, to Saul to heal this church hater's blindness, to baptize him, and to welcome him into the fold as an instrument of God's purposes. Saul and Ananias are quite literally led to one another by God. And not only that, but Saul finds that the very qualities that made him dangerous to the church have actually prepared him for his work on its behalf. His zealous energy is what sends him into the world to share Jesus and plant new churches. His training in Pharisaical Judaism is what enables him to argue against his former allies and to create a theology for this hybrid Jewish and Gentile movement. In Acts recounting, God's hand is at work in Saul's life and in the life of the church in an undeniable way. There was a time when I might have written this passage off as the kind of magical thinking that can make the Bible so hard to swallow. But the story of Saul's conversion holds a special power for me because I've experienced echoes of it in my own story. Although not exactly a persecutor of the church, I too was a harsh critic of Christianity in my young life. I had no patience for what I perceived to be the church's many hypocrisies. And like Saul, I've had this mysterious experience of being led into the very heart of what I thought I hated, to find myself transformed, not in Saul's blinding flash of light, but in a slow awakening to the sustenance of Christian community, to Jesus' message of grace and hope and justice, to the sacramental life. When I began to realize that I might be called into ministry, I had the strange feeling that all the skills I had spent time developing with other careers in mind had in fact prepared me for this one. It was as if I'd been moving through my life blind, and suddenly the scales had fallen from my eyes. I don't mean to aggrandize myself with this comparison to Saul, who of course became Paul, one of the greatest Christian saints. I tell the story really as a testimony that something has been at work, something larger than I, something that has led to a place I never would have led myself. Perhaps you've had experiences like this too. God is present in the journey we travel, how we live and move through the world. Maybe that's why in today's passage, Acts refers to the early church not as Christians, but as followers of the way. This seems significant to me. Followers of the way. At its core, being a disciple of Christ is not a religion, it's a way. A religion tries to nail down truth and smooth out contradiction for consistency's sake. A way encounters truths that may be contradictory as it moves towards God. A way is a journey, a passage through experience, a seeking. And so I stand by the paradox. God can and does guide us on our way. God does not guide the speeding car that kills the child, or the cancer that multiplies in the bone, or the tornado that destroys this life and spares that one. These two assertions may not be logically reconcilable, yet I feel in my bones that both are true. I say it's just my best current thinking. Certainly I don't have it all worked out, but if you'd like, I can walk along with you on the way for a spell, and we can puzzle on it together. Amen.
Amen.